Hello, Shiver Seekers. Are you ready to follow us into the unknown? I'm Cynthia.
And I'm Stephanie. You have found the Dark Oak. Today we explore the very sad missing persons case of Ebonee Spears, who went missing from her home during what may have been a mental health crisis.
Welcome to the Dark Oak, the mystery podcast with purpose. Each month, through the Branch of Hope Foundation, we give a portion of our earnings from our Patreon and sponsors to a nonprofit organization related to the first episode of the month. To find out how you can be part of the movement, head over to thedarkoak.com or stay with us until the end of the episode and we will give you all of the details.
Okay, Cynthia, before we get into our case today, I want to talk really quickly about the new Lacey Peterson documentary that's coming on Netflix. Have you seen this one? Because there was already one, and now there's a new one that's come out, I think maybe like a week or so ago.
No, I had no idea. I was so into that case. I feel like I saw something pop up on Netflix and I just assumed it was something I'd already watched. Anything there is on that case, I've seen it. So you're telling me there's something new?
Yeah, which I was kind of surprised about because they have the original, which was like American Family or
Yes.
American, like something like that. And actually, I never watched it. It came out in a time where it was just super sensitive about like children and the whole Connor situation. I was just like, okay, I can't watch it. And then this new one came out like a week ago, and it's only a 3-parter, but it covers a lot of the new information that you brought out in our re-examination of the case. I wish I had that episode number. We'll look it up. I'll put it in the show notes. But I watched the 3-parter, and the whole time I was like, oh, Cynthia covered that. Oh, Cynthia covered that. Oh, Cynthia covered that. So I was, first of all, so proud of our coverage of it. And also, Scott Peterson is still the horrible villain. He's awful. He is completely guilty. I mean, we kind of came to that conclusion after examining some of these theories that he could be innocent. And they had Scott Peterson's family kind of promoting these theories. And I get it. I mean, you don't want to imagine that your family member could do something so incredibly horrible.
Sure.
But they brought up like the robbery across the street and like that weird timeline. They brought up those like recorded phone line messages
Oh, yes.
with Amber Fry.
Probably the witness who said they didn't see a body in Scott's boat, I would assume, because that was like kind of an important point if you were team Scott Peterson.
Okay, interestingly, that one did not come up in
Oh.
this documentary,
Okay.
but they did talk about how weird it was that he had the umbrellas.
Yes.
And then they started talking about how weird it was that he had this boat that nobody knew about.
Sure.
And
Yep.
then got the fishing license. And again, he was like, I just wanted to get the boat in the water, but then why would you drive 90 minutes away? I mean, the most glaring thing to me, he's like, well, I canceled my day of golfing because it was so cold and just decided to go out on the water. Like, that made no sense.
No, that makes no sense. And now I'm not a fisherman,
A fisherman.
fisherwoman,
Yeah.
nor am I a golfer. And I do remember there was, because to me that didn't make any sense. And there was people who do both of those sports say it is a little different. You can't really golf when it's super cold and you're bundled up. You can get on a boat. So, devil's advocate.
To each their own, I suppose.
Yeah, devil's advocate. I guess that's not completely unheard of as it sounded to me.
Right.
But it's still strange.
It's still trained. All of it.
He's guilty.
Oh my gosh. I hate that he is. I hate to think that a husband and father could have done this to their wife and unborn child. I mean, I hate to think that that's possible, but I got to tell you, having listened to your kind of re-examine, because we were actually going to give him a fair shake. We said, you know what? This new information has come out. He has always claimed his innocence. Let's take a look at it and see. Let's consider this a mystery, an unsolved case. Let's look at everything fresh. And we came to the conclusion then that no, sorry.
Right.
This does not in any way mean that he could be not guilty. And then after watching this documentary, I was like, okay, I just
Totally. Yeah.
I cannot wrap my head around him being innocent. And even the detectives, they said that they were like, some of these theories, it's either a one-off conspiracy theorist that's spinning this, or it's somebody from the Peterson family.
Right. Well, and what I liked about our coverage is we literally went through and took what Scott said happened
Yes.
and then compared it to the evidence, the actual evidence. So if it lined up, it lined up.
Yeah.
And if you're telling the truth, it should. If the evidence does not line up with your story,
Yeah.
something's wrong. And I think we found over and over and over again, the evidence did not line up with what he said happened.
Yeah. So it's actually a quick little limited series. But anyway, I was like, oh, look at this.
I can't wait to watch it. Honestly, I really do feel like that's one of those, you know how you have the case where you're like, I know everything there is to know about this case.
Yeah.
I do feel like the Lacey and Scott Peterson is one where I feel like I know everything that a person, a lay person, not somebody working on the case, but just a lay person, a civilian might know about the case.
Yeah.
But I'll be interested to watch it. See, maybe I learned something new.
Honestly, if I would have watched that before we covered the case, there would have been things that I didn't know, but because you had basically told me everything, there was nothing shocking in it. So you're not going to watch it and say, oh, I didn't know about that or I haven't read about that. But I just loved how everything, I was like, oh, that's what Cynthia told me. Oh, that's what Cynthia told me.
Well, good. I'm glad. This is confirmation that I brought accurate information. It would have been really bad if they came out and like everything I'd said was inaccurate.
I never expected that for 1 minute. I never did. But yeah, it was a quick little watch. It was maybe only like 40 minutes and a little episode. And again, there's only like 3 of them. But it has a lot of interviews with Lacey's mother. It has a lot of interviews again with
Lacey's mother. Yes.
What an incredibly strong woman.
Well, and I told you I read her book in
Yes.
preparation
Yes.
for that episode. And yeah, I felt like I got to know Lacey on a totally different level. And man, yes, what a strong woman.
Yeah. I had some of Lacey's best friends on there too.
Mhm.
And them finding out that she had been missing, them finding out that she, was deceased, and how their bond has gotten stronger. It's really, it was encouraging in a way to see how these strong women kind of came out of it.
Yes. Yes.
Feeling more empowered to look after themselves and to look after each other. And so I don't know if there's ever a silver lining to such a tragic, horrible, terrible case. But I know that Lacey's mom would want that to happen.
Oh, sure. So yeah, she would be very happy. And that's one of the things she kind of said about Lacey was that she was proud of what a strong woman she was and what a good friend she was.
Yeah.
And even after losing Lacey, she enjoyed seeing Lacey's friends and seeing the women they, really grew into because they were so young.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to check it out.
Yeah. We talked about not too long ago the Unsolved Mysteries Mothman case. I will tell you this Lacey Peterson case is probably better than the Mothman case.
Well, and that is saying quite a lot now, isn't it?
Okay, enough chit chat. Let's get to it because this case is really important too. We talk about kind of like cases that move the needle a lot for you. This is one for me. I originally heard of Ebonee Spears' story on the Vanished podcast. Do you ever listen to that?
I have listened to The Vanished. Yes. It's a good show.
It is. And I think Marissa, the host there, does an amazing job of giving voices to each missing person. Like she truly gives them their due and there's no judgment. There's just this person is missed. This person is loved. It doesn't matter what their lifestyle was before. There's no perfect victim.
Right.
I mean, we all try to find that, right? Because it's a lot easier to talk about an innocent person being victimized than it is to somebody who has a past. But in the end, we all do. And I think, but I think
there's no perfect people.
There are no perfect people.
Yeah.
And I think Marissa does a really great job. And I was so excited for her to bring this case and really give it the publicity it deserved. And I wanted to kind of carry that on and talk about it in our podcast. And I'm even using it as a branch of hope case because I think it's that important. I want to give it a little bit more reverence, I guess.
Well, and I'm not familiar with this case other than, very blanket what you've told me just in preparation of our lineup. So I'm really curious to see what I'm going to learn.
Well, I'll tell you a few reasons why I think it's important. Number one, it's a case of a missing minority. And you and I, from the beginning, when we started talking about forming a podcast, we always wanted to make sure that we were giving equivalent coverage to all races, all nationalities. We didn't want this to just be
Yeah, like Missing White Woman.
we didn't want this to be like a missing white woman podcast. Like,
Mhm.
that's not at all where we're coming from. I do feel in this case, if Ebonee had been a white woman, it probably would have been covered more. I don't know for sure. That's just kind of my gut feeling. Even on The Vanished, there weren't as many comments and shares and likes as some of the other cases. And I just don't understand, because when you hear this, she had a wonderful family. She was a wonderful person, and she is absolutely someone that we need to help find. We need answers for her family. So the fact that it wasn't covered more to me is very strange. Secondly, this case highlights the importance of mental health awareness. And you and I have always advocated for mental health treatments on our podcast and, frankly, in real life. There are so many unseen struggles happening all around us. And sadly, we do know statistics have indicated that those experiencing some kind of mental health crisis are more vulnerable to crime. And it makes sense that we need to be looking out for those around us. And, this is just me saying, I want to say off the bat, I urge you to just check on people around you, check on your friends, check on your family. If you think they're struggling, let them know you're thinking about them. You don't normally have to do much more than that. Just let them know you're thinking about them. And if you are someone struggling with any kind of mental health struggles, reach out to someone. You are not a burden. You are loved, and there are people around you that genuinely want to help.
Well, and the thing is, everybody has these struggles, and so you're definitely not a burden. There's probably somebody who you could very much relate to, who may be able to help. So mental health is just as important as any type of physical health. It's all part of the human experience. Very important.
As you were saying that, there's somebody that you can relate to, it just reminded me of the conversation we had with Barton, my husband, in the kitchen this morning as we were grabbing coffee. We were talking about how Cynthia and I are so in sync now because we've been spending so much time together. And I kind of made the joke that, like, we were going to turn into one person eventually. And he looked at both of us and said there was no way that much anxiety could fit into one person. So, make sure we're not too related.
Too related. And also, you're hearing it from the horse's mouth. Mental health is important.
So anyway, sorry, I'm going to get off my soapbox. So let's get back on track here. Ebonee Spears, she was a 30-year-old Wilmington, North Carolina native who was described as outgoing, smart, and generally very pleasant to be around. Her mother, Harriet, described her as, quote, just a good girl.
Oh,
isn't that sweet?
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a simple phrase, but I feel like that means something to me.
Sure. Yeah, you can't say that about just everybody.
Exactly. She was the youngest of 4 siblings, so she had 2 brothers and a sister. And she, her mother, her father, and her siblings were all very close. They talked to each other regularly. They got together for meals. They were a tight-knit little group. After graduating high school, Ebonee had her daughter named Anaya, and with the help of her parents, she was successfully raising her. She was looking to expand her horizons, so she decided to move to Georgia, where she tried to pursue a modeling career at Casablanca Modeling School.
Oh, I tried to pursue a modeling career at Casablanca Modeling School.
How did it go?
Well, I'm 5 foot tall, so
not that well.
Not great.
Not great. Well, Ebonee had the height, and I will tell you, she absolutely had the looks. Unfortunately for her, though, as many models have found out, it's not exactly lucrative right off the bat.
Yeah. Very few just turn into, I almost said Cindy Crawford, because that's who, that was the big model back in the day when
exactly. Now it would be like Bella Hadid.
Yeah. Either way, you're probably not going to be Cindy or Bella right off the bat.
Right.
How old am I?
Listen, Cindy Crawford still got it. It's okay.
Well, she does. And the thing is, Cindy Crawford, even though, we're going back decades, she was the first big major supermodel. So yeah, she's still relevant.
She's still relevant.
Yeah.
Don't judge yourself, Cynthia.
Okay.
Just let it go. Just
Okay.
let it go.
I'll let it go.
Let your old lady flag fly.
All right.
So back to Ebonee. She wanted to pursue this modeling career, but also realized, you got to pay the bills. So she enrolled in Georgia Tech. She also picked up a job working for Comcast, But after only a short time in Atlanta, Georgia, Ebonee's mother required surgery, so Ebonee moved back to care for her.
Oh, see, she was a good
She
girl.
really is a good girl. She really cared about her family and she really cared about her parents. There are so many stories here. And her parents really cared for her. They had a really precious relationship. In the summer of 2015, Ebonee started to experience some very strange health symptoms. She was constantly tired and always cold. And some days she was barely able to function. She was having intense joint pain. She wasn't able to get out of bed. And after 6 months of severe illness and a huge battery of tests, Ebonee was diagnosed with lupus.
Oh, no.
Right. Are you familiar?
Just enough to know that it's not good.
It's not good. And to be fair, that's a correct answer because lupus, it's a long-term disease that can cause a myriad of symptoms and no two cases are alike.
Oh, geez.
So it's very reasonable that you can't say, oh yeah, it does this.
Okay.
It's an autoimmune disease. And ultimately that means that your body starts attacking itself. It thinks you have an infection. So it can attack any kind of healthy tissues. So it can attack organs. It can attack joints. It can attack your brain. It's a pretty hostile autoimmune disease. It can cause fever, joint pain, stiffness and swelling, rashes, skin lesions, fingers and toes that turn white or blue when exposed to cold or during stressful periods, shortness of breath, chest pain, dry eyes, headaches, confusion, memory loss. This is a whole thing.
Yeah, it's like a whole body attack.
It's like a whole body attack. And to make it even more complicated, lupus is very hard to diagnose because, again, there's no real test and there are no confirmed symptoms because everybody presents differently. So the signs and symptoms may come on slowly or they develop suddenly. They could be mild or severe. They could be temporary or permanent. It's just in this constant state of limbo dealing with lupus. And doctors essentially have to put puzzle pieces together to even diagnose it. They have to look at symptoms, medical history, family history, and some test and essentially come to the conclusion that you have lupus.
So, in other words, it's going to be a long time before you have any answers whatsoever. You're going to be feeling pretty bad for a while.
You're going to be feeling pretty bad for a while, exactly. And also, even after you get the diagnosis, there's no cure for lupus. The most that can be done is to treat your symptoms. So Ebonee was put on a few medications that were expected to make her feel better, or they at least anticipated they would make her feel better. The predominant one that she was put on is a steroid, which was supposed to help with some of that joint pain. And I don't know if you've ever been on a steroid medication, but outside of, making you feel like the Hulk, and it can also make you quickly gain weight.
I don't know that I actually ever have, but I have family members who've had to take them from time to time. And I know that the side effects are not good. They're not fun.
Not great. And unfortunately, this weight gain one hit Ebonee really hard. So she's already feeling terrible. And then she had this sudden weight gain. And to her, this was a big deal because she's looking in the mirror. She doesn't even recognize herself. And again, she had just left a promising modeling career. She had always been very small and petite and put together. And now what is happening to her body?
And that's hard. Anytime you're out of control of your own body, which she, like you said, already was, and now visually not seeing herself when she looks in the mirror. Yeah, that's rough.
Exactly. Unfortunately, because of all the things that we just talked about, she developed a pretty severe case of depression. This depression was worsened because she wasn't able to work. Even if she physically felt up to doing it, her repetitive doctor's appointments wouldn't allow her to do so. And then she started feeling like a bad mom because she wasn't able to care for her daughter the way that she wanted to. And soon her depression was also accompanied by anxiety, and she began to have panic attacks. Her mother, Harriet, said she would even have trouble with small tasks like going to the grocery store. She said Ebonee would leave the house with intentions of going shopping, like mind over matter kind of thing. But then she would call her mom as she was entering the grocery store and would just be frozen in a panic attack. And her mom would say, okay, it's okay. Just come back home. We'll work on it the next day. So I see you making a sad face. It is. This is tough.
I'm just imagining being a young mother with my whole life ahead of me and physically feeling awful and mentally feeling awful and no end in sight. I mean, in the past few years, especially, I've really learned how precious our health is. And so for her to be going through this incredible health crisis, I mean, it's awful.
It's really difficult. Really difficult. It soon became clear to her family that not only could she not care for her daughter, but she could barely care for herself, really. They were able to contact Ebonee's medical team and get her on some antidepressant medication, but Ebonee was still heavily struggling with both her physical and mental health. Her parents soon found themselves as almost caretakers for Ebonee, making sure she remembered to eat, making sure she remembered to take her medication. Ebonee had not given up completely, though. After her diagnosis, she did seem to get more focused in her life ambitions. She began attending church more regularly, and she had even applied to get her real estate license. So, again, she was feeling down, but she wasn't without hope. She was still trying to look forward. She was still trying to move forward. She was still trying to live independently and be able to care for her daughter. So I don't want to paint this picture that she was completely down and out, but she was absolutely going through some struggles.
Sure. But what a strong woman to say, I'm going to persevere and I'm going to keep going.
Exactly. Exactly. In early January of 2016, about a week before Ebonee's disappearance, she told her parents that she was really struggling. She was really in a down period. And she asked if her parents could watch Anaya for her until she could get her feet back under her, which I feel like is such a responsible mom move.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no shame in I've had those moments, not for like a prolonged period, but maybe for a day or two. It's going to be
Right.
best for everybody.
Someone take my children, someone take my husband.
Yes.
I need a minute. I need a minute.
But sometimes you just need that break. So good for her for recognizing that.
Right. And her parents willingly agreed. They wanted to do anything they could to help Ebonee and obviously cared very much for Anaya. They didn't even give it a second thought. So Anaya went to stay with Ebonee's parents and they lived just right around the corner.
Oh,
So,
good.
yeah, so this wasn't, she could still see her regularly. They were still in regular contact with her. It was a short drive back and forth. So this wasn't like a huge uprooting for
Okay.
Anaya.
Good.
Understanding that Ebonee was struggling, though, her parents still continued to keep a very close eye on her. They would check on her at least once a day. They would drive over to her apartment or they would make her come over to their house. They would make sure that she, again, was eating regularly and just kind of generally taking care of herself. Then on that Thursday, January 14th, the day before her disappearance, Ebonee's boyfriend called Harriet, Ebonee's mother, to tell her that Ebonee was erratically driving down the highway at speeds over 100 miles an hour.
Ooh.
Ebonee and her boyfriend had recently rekindled their relationship. And in an interview with Harriet, I don't know, she still kept calling him a friend, but I've seen media reports refer to him as a boyfriend. So I don't know if he was maybe something in the middle, but whatever it was somebody that was very close with Ebonee. And he was terrified. He was in the car with her. She wouldn't slow down. She was driving, again, very erratically, very dangerously. And he wanted advice on, like, what do I do right now? It turns out he and Ebonee had gone to a family function in a neighboring town. And they were just coming back into Williamsburg. And she just kind of lost it and started driving very uncharacteristically unsafe.
So no fight, no intoxication, just out of nowhere starts driving maniacally.
Yes, from
Yeah.
everything that we know.
That is scary.
Is scary, exactly. And Harriet didn't really know what to do, and they tried to get Ebonee to pull over or slow down.
He calls like
in
the
car,
moment.
yes, and says, "I
Ooh.
don't know what to do."
Oh no. Oh, I have chills.
Yes, it's scary.
Ooh.
This is a terrifying moment, and you can imagine her mother on the other side knowing, "Oh my gosh, this is incredibly dangerous right now."
Yeah.
So they're all trying to get Ebonee to slow down, to pull over, to just go home. Just go to your house, slow down, go to your house. We'll figure out what's going on. Again, they already know she's struggling. They already know something is not going well for her. So they're just trying to get her to go somewhere safe. Ebonee, though, refuses to go to her house and instead drives directly to the Wilmington Police Headquarters parking lot.
That's interesting. Okay, I'm very curious to know why she drove to the police.
At this point, we have no explanation as to why she drove directly to the police department. Harriet had no explanation as to why her daughter went there instead of to their home or to her home. She did recall a conversation with Ebonee where she and Ebonee's father had conveyed to Ebonee that if they felt she was a danger to herself, they would need to seek professional help. And so somehow she thought maybe Ebonee interpreted professional help as the police department. Like Ebonee felt so out of control or something was happening. And so she felt like that was a safe space, possibly.
Well, that was kind of my first and honestly only thought was she felt like she was in some kind of danger. And so whether it was herself, her boyfriend, something else, but she felt like that was a safe place.
Right. So that's the only conclusion anybody has been able to come to, but that's unconfirmed. We're really not sure. No one was really able to get more information out of Ebonee.
Because she didn't go into the police station and
she went to the parking lot. And of course, as Harriet's on the phone with her, the boyfriend's kind of saying, I think we're heading to the police station. And again, the police station is only a few blocks from Ebonee's house. So everything's very close. So Harriet and her husband jump in the car and head over to the police station. So they meet her in the parking lot. And at the time, EMS was also called. So the paramedics wind up coming to kind of assess the situation because something is happening. Something is happening to Ebonee right now. After assessing Ebonee and questioning everyone at the scene, it was the conclusion of the paramedics that Ebonee should probably seek psychiatric treatment. And Ebonee's parents agreed to that as well and said, yes, we would like you to take her somewhere where she can be evaluated, where she can be treated. Because again, this has kind of been coming for the last few days, right? But this was scary. She had actually put herself in real danger. So they strongly encouraged her to go to a psychiatric treatment facility. But Ebonee was not open to that idea. So Harriet wound up calling Ebonee's psychiatrist, who she had been seeing recently now that the depression had set in. Because Ebonee said she might be willing to go to the treatment facility if her psychiatrist was willing to meet her there. Unfortunately, at this time of the evening, the psychiatrist was not able to go or chose not to go. I'm not exactly sure, but whatever it was, the psychiatrist said it didn't make sense for her to go to the hospital because she didn't have privileges there. It's not where she worked. And it wouldn't make sense for her to be involved with their treatment of Ebonee. And I do get that a little bit.
I get the logistics of it.
At the same time, would it have been so bad to just meet her at the front door and say, you can do this?
Well, and I guess that's where you have to have boundaries, because if it's your kid's birthday party and you're getting this, like, there are reasons why you might have to set boundaries.
I know.
But also, I mean, what ends up happening here. So,
and I think that's it. I think if maybe this case hadn't ended up as tragic as it does, maybe no one would even be assessing this. And you're right. Having healthy boundaries is a good thing when you're in that line of work. It's just, all I will say is it's unfortunate that that wasn't able to come together and that Ebonee wouldn't just listen to the advice, again, of her family and paramedics. And she could have just been blowing up a smoke screen, knowing that her therapist would not go to the hospital. So whatever it was, the therapist, for her part, did say, I have some medications that we can work on, so I'm going to call those in for you.
Okay. And to be fair, I also understand why, if this is the person that you've been working with and that you trust, this is the person I'm willing to make myself vulnerable with. So I get it from Ebonee's point of view too.
I get it from all sides. Mm-hmm. I truly do. Based on all these elements, the paramedics really had no choice but to leave her in the care of her parents. And it did appear in paramedic reports that after about an hour, Ebonee did start to calm down a little bit and get some more of her faculties about her. She became much more lucid. I mean, she was just kind of in another zone when she first arrived, but she did start to calm down. So her parents, again, not wanting to make her combative, said, fine, go ahead, come home with us. The therapist had called in the medication. They said, we'll get it tomorrow. Come stay at our house tonight. We will look after you. So that night, she stayed over at her parents' home. She had breakfast the next morning. Harriet said that Ebonee would not speak to her because Harriet had been the most outspoken person about trying to get Ebonee help. And Ebonee was a little resentful about that. But knowing what happens next, it's difficult for Harriet. I can tell. I know this is difficult for her. But at the same time, she's like, well, I'm a mom. That's what I knew my kid needed. And I don't have regrets about that. But it is difficult to hear.
Well, and I don't know the details of what happens next, but I can kind of piece together where we're going with this. But Harriet should absolutely feel good about doing what was best for her daughter, regardless of how it was accepted.
Yeah. So again, Ebonee stayed over at her parents' house that night. She had breakfast with them the next morning, and then her father drove her back to her apartment. She said, I want to get cleaned up. I want to change my clothes. And again, she was acting much more like herself that morning, so they felt confident that she could spend a few hours by herself at her apartment. And the agreement was that she would come back over that evening to have dinner with them.
Reasonable.
It all seems very reasonable. After her dad dropped her off, she said, oh, I think my boyfriend's going to come over and he's going to bring me a little tea and a muffin because, again, that was the big thing to make sure she was still eating. She was still taking care of herself. And again, they thought they were going to see her later that night. At 7 p.m. that evening, Harriet called Ebonee just to confirm that she was still coming over for dinner. The call went to voicemail, but Ebonee called her mother right back and said that she had actually already eaten dinner and that she was just going to stay home. At the time, Ebonee's parents believed what she was saying. Again, they had just seen her a few hours earlier, but they would later find out that she wasn't home at all.
Oh.
Instead, she was walking up and down the street near her home.
Okay, it's getting not good.
It's getting not good. At 11 p.m., her boyfriend went by her apartment to check on her, but she wasn't there. He assumed she had maybe run to the store or popped out to visit a neighbor, and so he decided to wait for her. After waiting over 2 hours, though, so basically 11 p.m. to 1 a.m., he called Ebonee's daughter's phone, which he knew would be answered by her grandparents, and he told them that she was missing. Now, unfortunately, that 7 p.m. phone call to Ebonee's mom was the last one she would ever make on her cell phone. Between 7 and 8 p.m., while walking alongside the road, she managed to flag down a friend who was driving a van for the Community Boys and Girls Club, which was located on Nixon Street around the corner from her home. Also happened to be within a few blocks of the Wilmington Police headquarters. Now, he noticed she was acting unusually, and so what he did was drop her off at the Community Boys and Girls Club and told her to wait a few minutes for him to return. He had some more passengers he needed to drop off and pick up, but that when he returned, he would take her anywhere she needed to go. And I think this is a very responsible move.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds like he really cares. I think the only thing maybe he could have done differently if he had the space was just keep her in the vehicle with him.
Possibly.
There may have been a reason why he didn't do that, because it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Unless there was something for her to do wherever he dropped her off.
Well, there were other people there.
Okay.
I mean, it was an active club, so it wasn't just an empty building. There were other counselors. At one point, she even talks to a social worker.
Okay, so it made sense to drop her off there.
It made sense to drop her off there. Okay. Some of these interactions that she had with this social worker weren't necessarily talking about some of her emotional or mental needs, but rather she had her cell phone on her and the battery was dead. So she made her way around the club asking anybody if they had a cell phone charger. Unfortunately, no one did. It was later reported, though, that in these interactions, a lot of people noticed that she was acting a little bit paranoid, like possibly she thought somebody was following her. And then she just leaves the club and starts walking towards the police department. When she arrived at the police department at 8 p.m., she asked them if she could use the phone. And on surveillance camera, an officer seated behind the glass window is seen pointing to the payphone. The video then shows she picked up the phone and after a moment hangs up the phone, walks back over to the officer at the window where they have a brief conversation. Then she goes back to the phone, picks it up, and then hangs up. And then she goes off camera briefly during a time when the police officer on duty said she was using the restroom. And she comes back and she tries to use the phone again, but then she goes back to the window. And at this time, you can clearly see in the video, she's getting really agitated and she's like yelling at the officer. You can tell she's really worked up at this point. And it was reported later that she was upset because she couldn't get the phone to work.
Is this one where you need like a coin? Or
It is a payphone. Exactly.
Okay.
So I don't know. I don't think it was like a credit card type machine, but it's a payphone.
So
She would have had to insert money.
And maybe she didn't have it. Maybe she did. Like, was that the problem? Or we don't know.
It
We
was
don't even know.
literally never explained.
Okay.
I do know the phone was working.
Okay.
Whatever that means.
Because my vision is she has to use a phone, and it's a payphone, and she doesn't have a quarter or whatever they take.
Right, but aren't in some of the payphones, can't you like call? Well, no, I guess you have to put in the money.
You might be able to call. Can you call collect?
I don't know. Literally, I'm like these like prison phone calls. Like, do you accept the charges?
Have you ever used a payphone? Because do they even exist anymore?
Well, they did here. Maybe they do at police departments. I don't know. I've seen one very rarely.
Right. I guess as we're discussing this, I'm realizing that you and I just may not know how payphones work because they've been obsolete in a lot of places for so long. Not that I've never used one, but it's been decades.
The last time I actually used a payphone was in high school.
Sure. Yeah. Decades.
Has it been that long? But I have distinct memories of having coins in my pocket that I would call my mom when the sporting event was done, when practice was done, when whatever was done, and then she would come and grab me. So, yeah, I guess it's been decades. But yeah, I don't ever remember calling collect. I don't know if that's a thing. Maybe not. Maybe not.
Yeah, I truly don't know.
I don't know if it's she didn't have money. I don't know if at that moment, whatever was happening as part of her mental crisis was making it difficult for her to understand the mechanics of the phone. I'm just simply not sure.
Right.
And unfortunately, no police officers actually bothered to ask.
Well, see, that's what bothers me is because, police officers, you're there to help out. So if you see somebody coming in and they ask to make a phone call, whether the problem is they don't have the money or they can't figure out how to work the phone or they're having a mental break or whatever, you're not just Joe Schmo on the street. You don't feel compelled to help this person?
Well, listen, you're not the only one to feel like that. And I will tell you what happens the rest of the evening.
Okay.
There has been a lot of speculation about what happened here and what should have happened here that didn't happen here. Again, I mean, you're not just somebody manning a desk. You're a public officer.
Right.
I mean, you're there for the public health, the public good.
Right.
And she's part of the public.
So my husband's a police officer. I've mentioned that before. As a police officer, interactions with people who may be having mental health difficulties are not uncommon.
Right.
So even more, I don't understand why this person wasn't like, let me step in here. But okay, tell me more.
Right. By this time, Ebonee's screaming aroused a few more officers who walked out into the lobby. And one officer claimed that Ebonee smelled of alcohol, but no one else has ever said that. And her mother out and out was like, that's just a lie. Like, that just didn't happen.
Ew. For some reason, I don't know why, but that just makes me feel like somebody was trying to blow her off or something. Like, I don't know. I'm bothered by that.
Yeah, and in the context of where I'm going next, you'll see how it just doesn't, it doesn't sit well.
Yeah, it feels icky.
Yeah. After becoming visibly upset on the surveillance video, she also starts appearing disoriented, like pacing back and forth, and she does this for 10 minutes.
Oh, my goodness.
10 minutes.
And we're just sitting here behind our desk watching it happen.
Yeah, and not only is she becoming aggressive with the officers, but she's literally crying.
Oh, Stephanie.
And she's pacing. Like, what is happening right now? Now, continued surveillance footage shows Ebonee walking out after pacing around for 10 minutes. She walks out of the police headquarters and she heads back in the direction of her apartment complex. We know all of this has happened now, but at this point, all Ebonee's parents know is that she called them, said she was at her apartment, but then the boyfriend got there
at
1
a.m.
At 1 a.m. and
they
she's not there.
Yeah.
So they, of course, kept trying her phone all that
man.
night. It's going straight to voicemail. So early the next morning, they report to the police that their daughter is missing.
Ugh, the police who just had her 12 hours earlier, if that.
If that, exactly. And I will tell you, this is where the case gets super frustrating, as if it wasn't already.
I'm already kind of
I know
frustrated.
you're already getting
Well,
a little hot.
Just because I feel, we can do better. We can do better. Okay, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but please.
Yeah,
Ugh.
do better. So Ebonee disappeared on Friday night. She was reported missing on Saturday morning. Officers finally came to her parents' home to make a report on Monday.
What?
Monday. But the detectives who would cover her case were off on Monday because it was a Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. So no one actually started looking for Ebonee at all until Tuesday.
She was reported missing Saturday morning.
But no one came to even take
a
a report.
report wasn't even done until Monday.
And then they didn't start looking for her until Tuesday.
Where is this?
Wilmington, North Carolina. It's not in the hills. I mean, I guess technically it is in the hills, but you guys know what I mean. Like the proverbial.
It's not in the sticks.
It's not in the sticks. There we go. It is in the hills. Sorry, everyone, North Carolina. We actually love your mountains. But I'm just saying, like, this is a very well-funded, populated city. I have no idea why this happened, but it is not acceptable.
Is this typical? They just don't take missing persons reports over the weekend? We don't work on holidays? Sorry. I cannot imagine that this is typical.
I would hope not. I mean, I'm just going to say I hope not. But then why was her case treated like this? Did it fall through the cracks?
Right. If this is typical, we have a problem. And if it's not typical and it was just her case, we have a problem.
4 days. 4 days went by with no real police attention given to this case.
Okay, so she is an adult, and I know that there is that rumor that you have to wait 48 hours to actually file a police report, which is not true, or a missing persons report, which is not true.
Right.
But I wonder if they were telling them that. I wonder if they were telling her family, you have to wait 40 hours, give it 48 hours, which would put them, right around the Monday mark.
Would that be acceptable to you? If that was your kid?
No.
No way.
It's not acceptable to me now. I don't even know Ebonee. This is unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
And we're off for a holiday. Okay, I get it. Detectives do have certain hours, but there's somebody there. There's somebody on call. There's somebody.
There should be. Of course. There's somebody on call.
Yes.
It's what you
So
do.
the fact that, nobody's going to go looking for her.
Yeah. I didn't like it either. I didn't like it.
Oh, is this the same police department that she was in?
Yes.
You
can draw some conclusions from that.
Okay. Oh, I'm angry.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. Hence, me covering Ebonee Spears' case with like a vengeance.
This is one of those cases where I'm
vengeance.
angry.
Yeah. Her parents and her family wasted no time, though. They immediately started printing flyers with her picture. They plastered them everywhere. I mean, Ebonee's face was everywhere. They were like, well, I don't care what you guys are doing. We're going to do what we can do. Basically canvassing the neighborhood.
Well, somebody's got to. Makes me tear up thinking about it. I cannot imagine being her family and feeling like nobody cares. Like, this is the most important person in the world.
I don't know if this is a race issue, but I will tell you, it doesn't look good.
And I don't even know what the population is there, so maybe she wasn't a minority here. I don't know. But either way, I feel so bad for her family who's like, my daughter's missing. And they're like, yeah, maybe after our barbecue, we'll go look. Like,
Exactly.
It's nothing.
Exactly.
Like, it's nothing.
Right. After questioning some of Ebonee's neighbors, one man came forward saying he had seen Ebonee the night of her disappearance. According to this man, who was visiting family members that lived in Ebonee's apartment complex, Ebonee had asked him for a cigarette around 10:45 that evening. So this would have been several hours after leaving the police department. She got to the police department around 8. She was there approximately 15 minutes. And then she had to walk back to her apartment. So, I don't know, a little over 2 hours that are kind of unaccounted for.
But this tells us she made it home. The tragic thing is, it's 15 minutes before her boyfriend got there.
Right. He seems to really believe it was 10:45. And then the boyfriend gets there at 11.
That is just tragic. If
Tragic,
that's accurate.
If it's accurate.
Yeah.
And that's been some of the speculation. Like, is it truly that tragic?
Right. Were we that close?
Exactly. Were you truly? And maybe they were. It does seem like a very skinny timeline to me, though.
Especially if she's on foot, presumably.
Correct.
Like, does she have a car?
She does have a car.
And it's in the parking lot of the apartment?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when they go to search her apartment, they find the car.
Okay.
It's there. It's drivable.
So she's on foot or in somebody else's vehicle, but she's not in her car.
She's not in her car. Now, this man said he declined to give her a cigarette because he didn't have any. And so Ebonee said, oh, don't worry about it. I'll just walk to the store to get some.
Okay.
And this was the last time that Ebonee was seen. Again, if you believe this eyewitness testimony. After this, the official search for Ebonee kind of stalls. Police officers say there's just not much more that we can do. Now, again,
why does that not surprise me?
Her family was extremely dissatisfied with this answer. So they wound up contacting CUE, Center for Missing Persons. And CUE, again, stands for Community United Effort. As it turns out, CUE was founded in Wilmington, North Carolina, but they currently serve missing persons cases nationwide. And spoiler alert, CUE is also our Branch of Hope Foundation sponsored nonprofit organization for the month of September. So we'll cover a little bit more about that organization at the end of the episode, but CUE is very integral into the search here. They, again, began canvassing the neighborhood, but shockingly, no one else reported seeing Ebonee, which does seem strange if she had been walking up and down the street for all these hours.
That is strange. That's very strange.
CUE also began to hone in on the fact that the officers didn't help her while she was in the police department. I mean, this seems like a very clear call for help. And when officers were questioned as to why, they seemed to indicate that they thought she was just intoxicated and there was just nothing they could do to help.
If somebody is so intoxicated, they can't use a phone or they could be a danger to themselves. I mean, all of these things, again, you step in. Right? Public intoxication is actually, you can get arrested for that. Am I wrong? Am I just,
No.
am I virtue signaling? Am I wrong? But no, I'm not wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong in this at all. And I need you to stay seated when you hear this.
No,
next sentence.
Stephanie.
The head officer on duty even responded by saying that she had, quote, given Ebonee a pass for acting so belligerently toward police officers.
Well, and here's the thing. When you were describing Ebonee as yelling at the officers and stuff like that, I thought, well, that's interesting. Like, you could get arrested for doing that. But quite frankly, it would have been for her own good.
I agree. So they basically like, well, she's this drunk woman that doesn't know what she's doing, so we're just going to give her a pass to not ruin her night. Was kind of their general feeling.
Which I guess not being arrested is kind of like nice to not be, thanks for not arresting me.
I would prefer to not be arrested.
And I guess no one would have any way of knowing what's going to end up happening to her.
Of course not.
But you still have to take the whole situation into account. And if she's really as bad off as it seems she was, you have no choice. You just can't ignore that. You can't just give somebody a pass. I mean, I guess you can, but
well, she did. I don't know that it was the right call, though.
Well, clearly not, in my opinion.
Right. Now, when that front desk officer, the one that Ebonee was interacting with the most, was questioned, she did again confirm that Ebonee was upset and that she was crying. She said she did ask Ebonee if she needed any medical attention, but this angered Ebonee and she got frustrated, and that's when she left the facility. Maybe that's the case. I just feel like this was just mishandled.
Yeah.
And when it all boils down to it, it honestly doesn't matter what our opinion is. The fact of the matter is her family thinks that she was treated unfairly. I'm going to give the police department the benefit of the doubt. I think if they had known what would happen, maybe they would have been more proactive about it. I mean, they don't have a crystal ball. No one knew this was going to happen, but it just doesn't look good.
No, you got to feel terrible. I mean, honestly, as a human being, they must just feel terrible. Man, if I'd handled this differently, maybe this girl would still be around.
Right. In a later interview, the lead detective on Ebonee's case was asked about the possibility of detaining Ebonee on that Friday evening for her own safety. It was confirmed that in the state of North Carolina, there is a law that would have allowed for involuntary commitment of a person if that person is a danger to themselves. But on the night of the 16th, they didn't feel that it was necessary.
And, again, that's not a job I've ever worked. I've never been a police officer. I've never had to make that call. And, it is, I guess, not as clear cut, I guess. Sometimes it really is like a judgment call and
Yeah.
you have to, use your own intuition and perception. So I wasn't there, but I want to watch this video because it sounds to me like this video is pretty clear.
Well, that would be great if the police would ever release the
No.
video.
Oh, okay. See, now I'm mad again.
They did let Harriet view the video, but no one else has ever been able to see the video. So just take that for what it will.
And I would say if it absolved them from any fingers pointing at them, why not share it?
I don't know. Guess you'd have to ask them.
Give me the number.
With no one else to point a finger at outside of people that may not have made the right judgment calls that evening, suspicion came back to that man that said he saw Ebonee that evening. Police completely believe his credibility and point to the fact that he was able to accurately describe the clothing that Ebonee was wearing that night, and they were able to match it with what was on their video surveillance. Now, to me, that absolutely confirms that he saw her. Does it confirm that he saw her at 10:45 and she was alive and well when she walked away from him?
No.
Not really.
No.
But they're saying because these details line up, we are thinking he's credible. Ebonee's mother, Harriet, has doubts, however, because again, if this timeline was correct, why did her boyfriend not see Ebonee on the side of the road as he was driving to her house? It was dark, maybe he missed her, but it does seem like a very small window.
I agree it's a small window, and I agree, especially given the situation, knowing that Ebonee is going through some stuff and acting a little differently, you would think you'd be kind of like on high alert as you're driving.
Well, again, he went over at 11 o'clock just to check on her.
Right. But just because she's walking around doesn't mean she necessarily is walking right on that road. It is dark. It's in the middle of the night.
It's true. Now, a canvass of convenience stores and general stores in the area that would have sold cigarettes yielded no additional clues. No one fitting Ebonee's description had shown up at any of these stores. So if she had taken off to get cigarettes, she never ended up in a store where she could have purchased them.
And here's the thing. If she's walking along on the side of the street, not in a place where she's able to make good decisions or take care of herself, and the right, and by right I mean wrong, person comes along, she's very vulnerable. Like, it's very possible that she did leave at 10:45 and just
got plucked
was
up
in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Exactly. Which, oh gosh, that just, it's like a pit in the bottom of my stomach.
Well, you have to tell me more about this case, but I'm assuming we've never found a body.
Correct.
So she went somewhere, and I'm assuming the area surrounding her apartment has been searched and no body has ever been found. She went somewhere.
Well, she went somewhere. According to police detectives, the area around Ebonee's apartment was searched with both dogs and men on horseback, but no trace of Ebonee was ever found. A trace on Ebonee's phone records seemed like a glimmer of hope because we know that she had her phone on her, but they also yielded no clues.
When it's dead, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
That cell phone was a really important piece because I mentioned her car was still found at her apartment, but also her purse and her medication were still at the apartment as well.
So I guess it's potential she just had cash in her pocket or her wallet.
Absolutely.
If she's going to buy cigarettes. If I were going to make any kind of purchase, I would take my purse.
Yeah. Again, we know she was experiencing some kind of mental health crisis. So I don't know that those things necessarily indicate anything one way or another.
Sure.
But it is notable that her possessions were still there.
Mm-hmm.
So it certainly eliminates any thought in my mind that she just disappeared of her own accord.
The fact that her body has not been found in the area, because how far is a woman who, quite frankly, is not in a place where she's able to even use a payphone, how far is she going to get on foot? I would think right now what things are looking at, two options. Either something happened to her and she did not make it very far, in which case we should have found evidence of that, or something happened to her that took her away. And I'm kind of leaning that way.
Right. Theories, and in some case, rumors about what may have happened to Ebonee started to circle around Wilmington. In 2017, information came out that when Ebonee was living in Atlanta, Georgia, she may have stolen money from someone who later sought revenge. And if this is the case, This supposed theft would have literally happened 10 years earlier when Ebonee was living in Georgia. And because of the involvement in the two states, this actually prompted the FBI to join the investigation to get more details, which I was like, okay, that's probably for the best.
We finally have somebody on the case besides her
Right.
family.
However, an attempt to even track down the person who began this theory turned up nothing. So it's a lot of idea that this is simply a rumor mill situation. And Harriet flat out disputes this entire theory. She confirms that when Ebonee came back to Wilmington, she was, in her words, flat broke. And at this point, it seems unlikely that this was a cause of her disappearance. It just seems like people were speculating. Scrutiny has been given to the week before Ebonee's disappearance. Remember, she had asked her parents to watch Anaya, and this was definitely unusual. Also, during this time, she had told her family she felt someone was following her. Well, in the days before this strange behavior started, Ebonee, along with several of her friends, attended a party held in a hotel room at the local Hilton Hotel. So this would have been immediately preceding this very strange mental health crisis that she's going through. Strangely, everyone at the party has been very tight-lipped about what happened at the party. And again, these people were described as some of her friends. So maybe there's a simple explanation. Maybe there was some possible illegal activities or something that nobody wants to talk about, that partygoers might be concerned over. But if it would shed any light on the disappearance of their friend, you would think that would trump any concern they have about possibly getting in trouble for maybe some illegal drug use or underage drinking or something like that.
Sure. It's kind of giving Kanika Jenkins vibes.
That's
exactly
exactly what I thought about.
Yeah.
Where it made everybody look highly suspicious.
Because nobody wants to talk.
Because nobody wants to talk. Exactly.
I mean, the only thing I could think of is, like, did something happen to her at that party that then just sent her in a downward spiral? Or could she have potentially participated in some kind of drug usage or been drug, something like that?
Exactly.
An attack, something like that.
Yeah. And her family actually puts a lot of stock in this.
Okay.
They think that this could have precipitated some of what wound up happening to her. Ebonee loved her family and was described as a very reliable person. She was a devoted mother to her daughter. So, her family does not believe that this is something that she voluntarily decided to leave her family.
Well, to me, that is clear. To me, she either wandered away due to this mental crisis, which would not be her walking away voluntarily, or something nefarious happened to her. I don't think she left voluntarily.
Right. Her mother, Harriet, said, quote, "How can anyone endure not knowing nothing about a family member that's missing? She'd call me and say, 'Hey, Mom,' just to talk and check in on me every day. And that's what I truly, truly miss." Harriet still longs for the day that she might hear her daughter again, but knows that in reality, she may one day have to lay her child to rest instead. She said, quote, "I'm not fearful of the phone call because I would know one way or the other if she's with us or if she's not. Just a phone call either way." Ebonee Spears is still considered a missing person. If you have any information on her case, please contact the Wilmington Police Department at 910-343-3686 and use case number 2016-001807. And as I promised, I have some more information on the Q Center for Missing Persons. I want to reiterate, they're a 501c3 not-for-profit organization completely run by volunteers. And in order for you to join, you have to state this oath.
Oh.
Here it is. Quote, "I offer myself to those who have nowhere else to turn. These desperate people who ask for my help have unique situations. Yet, however unique, they are bonded together with the community of being the loved one of a missing person." Yeah, I know.
Seriously, I'm like, whoo.
Yeah.
It's getting to me.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. So incredibly pleased to support them in the month of September.
Me too. And, this is one of those cases that I think is recent enough. And if we can get the word out, I do think there's a potential that this case could one day be solved. Either we find remains or somebody reveals something that they know. I think this is solvable. But
oh my gosh, I hope so.
Man, just all the near misses.
I feel like this case is riddled with what ifs.
Right.
And the what ifs will destroy you.
You know what? That's so true. You can't live like that. You can't live like that. It's what happened, and that's what we have to deal with. But you're right. I see it being very hard to not go there.
Right. And her parents were fighting so hard to get her treatment. And I think that's where it's just very frustrating from every angle. They knew what she needed and they were fighting to get her help. They weren't able to get it quick enough, but it wasn't for lack of effort.
Oh, no, no. Well, and it sounds like everybody was really trying, and I think probably everybody has regrets. I'm sure her therapist, regardless of the fact that she may have had some really healthy boundaries, I'm sure she probably has some regrets.
I believe that. And I'm sorry if it came off as me just completely throwing shade, but it's so hard because you think, what if?
Right.
What if? And I'm sure she was a fine therapist and was doing the best she could to help Ebonee. It's just so unfortunate that none of these pieces lined up
Right.
in order to get the help that she needed in time.
Right, right. I feel regret for all the little things that didn't come through for her.
So there we are. Again, our Branch of Hope always cheers us up. We've got a wonderful organization to support. And again, any proceeds that we get from our Patreon or our sponsors, any additional donations we receive from our listeners will go directly to Q Center for Missing Persons for our whole month of September. And we're so grateful to support them.
And I can tell you, I've seen that we've had a lot of traffic over on our Patreon from our listeners, and that is a great way for you to get plugged in. Not only do you get some extra goodies, some extra content, and we are actually working really hard to build up that library. We've spent like the first year of our life really building our main library, and we're now working on doing the same for our Patreon. So there's going to be a lot of good content coming out there. But if you decide to join, you can feel really good knowing that a portion of your proceeds is going to our Branch of Hope recipient every single month. So you can feel really good about that.
Yep.
Best of both worlds.
Absolutely. Well, Cynthia, I think you're bringing us our case next week. Tell me what you're working on.
Next week, I am telling you all about the disappearance. It's another disappearance, but it's totally different. And it's kind of, I'll tell you, it's got all the things. It's got mystery. It's got intrigue. It's got ghosts. It's got psychics. It's got a little bit of everything. It's the disappearance of Kathy Moulton, which is the oldest active missing persons case in Maine and one of the oldest active missing persons cases in the entire United States.
Oh.
And it's one there's not a whole lot of coverage on. So I can almost guarantee you will hear things that you've never heard before. This is not a highly covered case.
Look at you, girl. Just bringing it. I love it.
Well, I got to keep up with you, Steph.
Well, Shiver Seekers, we love you and we thank you so much for your support of The Dark Oak. Can't wait to see you next week, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This episode of The Dark Oak was created, researched, written, recorded, hosted, edited, published, and marketed by Cynthia and Stephanie of Just Us Gals Productions, and made possible by you, our shiver-seeking listener. Special thanks goes to Justice Himes for our incredible artwork and Ryan Crete for our amazing music.